I was telling my daughters, they're 6 and 7 now, about I was going away to preach and told them I was going to the Sunshine Cathedral. And Athena looked at me and she said, "Is that the one with the good music?" And yes, that's the one we were talking about. I don't know how to follow that, but we'll try our best. Won't you pray with me? God, who both sees and loves us for who we are, in your compassion for the world, tune us to a key that we might embrace even those whom the world claims to be unlovable. For it is in our embrace of others that we feel you come near. Amen. Imagine with me that you're living in the first century and you hold a position of power and prestige in Palestine. Then you are one of the ones who actually gets what Jesus is putting down. You are picking up what he is putting down after meeting this Jewish rabbi. You've heard his message and decided that his words and deeds are both compelling and convicting. Then Jesus decides to come to your house and dine with you and for dinner, and it's a big deal. Now imagine with me that it's the present day and you're not known for any of that, but instead you are forever and always known by a silly children's Sunday school song that calls you a wee little man. How would you feel? Talk about compensating for something, right? Like, this wee little man here. We all know it. If you went to Sunday school, you know the song. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. And he climbed up in that sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. And as our Savior passed that way, he looked up in that tree, and Jesus said, "Zacchaeus, you come down, for I'm coming to your house today." Who says Sunday school doesn't work? That wasn't even on the teleprompter. I know that by heart, right? Like, today we hear a story that many of us at least have sung about since our days as children in Sunday school. That wee little man, better known as Zacchaeus, is a tax collector. He's not only the tax collector, he's the chief tax collector. This would have been a wonderful position for someone like him. This would have enabled him to have a lavish lifestyle because of his ability to scoop some funds off the top of the coffers without anyone being any the wiser. This man would have fit in perfectly in Washington, D.C. today. But here's the difference between Zacchaeus and maybe our leaders today. Zacchaeus, despite his poor lifestyle choices in the past, knew that he had a future filled with hope. I wish some of our leaders would recognize that today. His yearning to see what all this fuss was about with Jesus put him on a collision course with God. One of my favorite things about this Jesus I've come to know is the chaotic nature of his love and his engagement with people. Jesus chose not to see this man for his short stature, for his title as the chief tax collector, or for his questionable past. Jesus saw him for the innate goodness that was within him. Something that we all have too, if we're honest with ourselves. And Jesus couldn't care less about what the other people thought of his decision to dine with the tax collector. That was between him and Jesus. Because Jesus knew that in seeing Zacchaeus for who he really was, he was showing a form of love that sometimes the proud and the righteous and the self-imposed can't understand. Because love, real love, is being seen by people. How many times have you been sitting at a bar or a restaurant not wanting the dinner to end because the person across the table sees you for who you are and doesn't want the conversation to end either? How many of you have been walking along the beach here in Fort Lauderdale with a friend or a spouse only to realize that eternity isn't some far-off concept but a real and present reality, because in that moment you are loved, and that in and of itself is infinity. How many of you have sat in a hospital room as the hushed whispers of what's next are too much to bear? Because the person sitting in that hospital bed has known you better than you've known yourself. How many of you relish the memory of someone now long gone because their presence was not only a comfort, but your help and stay all those years? To love, to really love, is to see someone for who they are and does not shrink back. This ultimately is the message of God for us today, that we are all grafted into the story. We are all part of this story because we are all seen for who we are in our beauty and in our frailty. There is no place you could go or nothing you could do that is beyond the reach of God's abundant compassion and love for you, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And oftentimes, as we see in today's text, the way we think of failings, the way we see ourselves, is not the way that God sees us. It's not the way that others see us. God sees us. We should see others as possibility and as promise. What's sad is that many people who claim to be Christians or followers of Jesus see those failings as exclusionary or beyond redemption. They're just beyond repair. Why are we even messing with them? They'll never get it right. The idea that you can't join our club because you stumbled or messed up in the past may sound like how most people act today, but it sure doesn't sound like Jesus to me. Here's the other thing that's just as important about this text, though. Don't rest. Don't get complacent here, because love demands action. Just because Jesus saw Zacchaeus where he was up in that sycamore tree didn't mean that Jesus intended to leave him there. So many of us have loved someone who struggled with addiction or some other similar malady. And what you hear from those people isn't that they want sunshine and daisies to make up for the past and it all to be as it was before the addiction took its hold. You just want the situation to change from where it is now. In that same fashion, God desires for us to turn into God instead of away from God and find fresh traces of grace, hope, compassion, love there. God may have found you here today at Sunshine Cathedral, but God will never leave you where God finds you. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. In 2024, I was invited by then President Joe Biden to give the invocation at the White House for the 4th of July celebration. It was the honor of a lifetime. So my family and I made our way up the South Lawn to where the opening ceremonies would be held. The assistant in charge of getting me to the holding area took myself and my wife, Stephanie, and guided us away from the rest of my family who had come for the day and into the east wing of the White House. As we began to walk through the halls of the White House, it began to pour rain. I felt a little bad for my family who was outside, but I was in the White House. Don't worry, though, they weren't left out there long. We quickly learned that the ceremonies were to be delayed 20 minutes because of the storm, and it would blow through the district as those storms do during the summer. The assistant informed me that Stephanie and I could walk through the halls of the White House only if we were on our best behavior. Given that there was an armed Secret Service agent a few steps away, I reluctantly agreed to behave. I'd try my best, I said. Stephanie and I began to walk through the halls of the hallowed space where every president since John Adams has resided, both the good and the not so good. We saw where Abigail Adams hung her laundry indoors for the fear of the public seeing her bloomers. President Theodore Roosevelt turned that into the present-day library. We saw the diplomatic room where Franklin D. Roosevelt gave his historic fireside chats and announced the invasion of occupied France on D-Day. We walked into the Vermeil room where many First Ladies' portraits are hung and housed, along with some of the famed White House china. It was there under the portrait of Jackie Kennedy, one of the most famous of all First Ladies, where Stephanie looked at me and said, "You were meant for this work." What Stephanie was saying wasn't that I was meant for the power or the prestige or to even be in the White House, but the work that I was doing as a pastor in public theology was my highest and truest calling. I was being my truest self. And she recognized it for what it was. In a moment of love, she saw me for who I was at my very core, with everything else stripped away, and how that core was now being recognized by others and those around me. Don't we all spend our lives trying to have other people recognize who we are, the work we do, the importance therein? That's human nature, right? But when others see us and call us who we are for who we are by a name we've only known for ourselves, that's what love looks like. That's what love looks like. And here in Luke 19, Jesus doesn't just call Zacchaeus by the titles and monikers that the world has assigned to him. He acts out of the love we ought to have for others by instead saying, I see your potential. Don't you dare abandon who you are. In our present day, I am certain that I would not have seen Jesus at the White House, especially now. I would not have seen Jesus in the halls of power, not in the offices of Doge, where they're all claiming to be Christ followers. We would see Jesus in the queer spaces and the immigrant spaces. We would see Jesus calling trans people by their self-determined and self-desired names and pronouns, not because Jesus thought it was the politically correct thing to do, but because to see someone for who they are is the greatest act of love. That's what love is. That's what this world is missing. We are failing to see each other for our intrinsic goodness, the godness within us. Jesus would not bind himself to the law so strictly that he could not see a path forward in this country for those who are here without documentation. Because Jesus himself was once an asylum seeker in Egypt. Jesus would show up with the marginalized communities not because he wanted to change them or make them better, but because he knew he had to be about his Father's business, and that's where the business begins. We are the ones who've lost our vision, not Jesus. To God, it's clear where we ought to be. The question is, why the hell aren't we there too? Earlier this year, I started to get these headaches, and they were really kind of bad. They were just not fun at all. My vision was blurred, and I felt something was going terribly wrong with my eyesight, which I've struggled with my entire life, so I was immediately worried. I'd just gotten new glasses, so I wondered if that might be part of the problem. Instead of going to the original prescriber, I got smart and went to a second opinion from another optometrist. It turned out that the first doctor had gotten my prescription so wrong that it was hurting my vision. The thing I believed that was helping me to see was so off base that it might have cost me my sight had I not gotten it corrected. Do I need to fill in the blanks, church? So too, our vision is so focused on the sinner, the thing we need to change about them, or the tax collector and what's wrong with them in our midst, that we forget that they hold within them the very image of God. They're created in God's image. Who gave us permission to treat them with disrespect or to hold them in ill repute? Our vision is such that we are hyper-focused on how wrong we think people are, when our vision should be fixated on how loved people are. Love's the goal. Love's the end game. Love will bring us home. It's hard to condemn someone you love. And anyone who condemns you as they know you does not love you. To see someone as they are and to love them is to know who God is. We love people not so that they can get their little card punched, their little Christian card punched, or whatever you want to call it, so that they might enjoy eternity or eternal bliss. We love people because love is the only conduit in this world that is powerful enough to change this world. Up on the projector there on the screen, one of my favorite pieces of art is in the Christian tradition is the 15th century painting that shows Jesus during the period between his death and resurrection, those 3 days where he harrowed hell. It's a really great story in our tradition. And in the rendering, Jesus was literally kicked down a door. And he's kicked it down so hard that it crushes a demon, keeping people in their torment. You can see the demon kind of crushed there under the door. I love that. How creative. How incredible. Jesus reaches out his hand to all of us who feel that we're trapped and says and borrows from Mark Twain that he'd rather go to hell for the company and heaven for the climate. Or as Billy Joel so eloquently penned in that 1977 song, I'd rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints. The sinners are much more fun. Jesus knew what was going on. He saw it. He knew where the liberating powers of love lie, not with perfection or with pious sentiment or who attends church the most, but with the nitty-gritty of this transient life. He saw us, and he loved us. Jesus knew that eternity was not then and there, but here and now. Jesus knew that in the fullness of times, the things that we think matter right now won't matter at all. This is the message of forgiveness and reconciliation that we hear in Luke and in all of the Gospels. Once we were no people, but now we are God's people. At the end of the day, if I get to heaven, and I know some of you might think that's presumptuous of me, Jesus is okay with me getting in. If he's okay with me getting in, I don't think I'll be judged for the way I ate with sinners, tax collectors, and those on the fringes and marginalized of society. I actually think I would be judged if I didn't do that. I would be held in contempt if I weren't found with them on that day of judgment. We must forgo the notion that this world is all about who's in, who's out, who's got it, who doesn't. And remember that God's desire for the world is not exclusivity, but that we might all be seen for who we are and loved because of it, and in spite of that truest self. God's desire for us is a big table with plenty of room to spare. Whereas the old spiritual goes, there's plenty good room in my Father's house. Enough for all. What Zacchaeus recognized in that sycamore tree that day long ago is the same truth that we can take with us to heart today. God sees us for who we are and loves us. There's no asterisk or footnote that seeks to demean or detract from that love. There is no way you can get away from the love of God. I'm sorry. There's no way. Many of you will now realize that I've been here a few times, and I'm preaching here another 2 times this year, which I'm grateful for, to be your Canon Theologian. But one of the things all of you who are my Facebook friend and elsewhere have realized is that I'm a nerd. Unapologetically so. If you haven't, you may now be seeing me for the first time as who I am, and this sermon is also for you. I'm preaching 2 other times, and you can come back with the nerdy things that you might have for yourself. I'd love to learn them. But one of the most nerdy things about me, what makes me the most nerdy of this sermon, is my fandom of Star Wars and Star Trek. Some of you may wonder how my kids will be raised. And don't worry, I have shown them both Star Wars and Star Trek, and they can choose the religion for themselves that they desire. Someone came up to me before the service, in between the services, they're saying, "I'm so thankful for your sermon." I was like, great, wonderful. I'm glad I can like Star Trek and Star Wars too. If that's what you get out of the sermon today, great, but maybe something else too. I'm dating myself a bit. Let's get back to it, I promise. Let's get back to it. I was a kid when the prequels to the Star Wars series came out, and next month we'll celebrate the 20th anniversary of Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. It is the culmination of the prequel series when, spoiler alert, Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader. and the Republic falls to become an empire. Yikes. The Galactic Senate applauds. Yikes. This is all coming true. I don't know if I like it like that much, but I digress a little bit. What's so exciting about this, though, is that my wife and I are taking our 6 and 7-year-old daughters to see the film as it re-airs in cinema next month. That's because, as I've said, the girls, they've started to watch this show. They started to watch Star Wars with me. And here's the thing, while I know Athena and Phoenix have come to love the queens and the princesses, R2-D2 and lightsabers, I really don't think that's why they first loved Star Wars. They first loved Star Wars because they saw that I saw something in it. They saw my passion and my zeal for the series. They came to love something because I was showing it to them and what I saw in it. They love the films now because they've come to appreciate it for their own purposes, but first because someone they loved chose to let them in on the story. Isn't that how it works with faith? God pleads with us to see each other here in this room and beyond, how God sees us and treat us in like manner. Jesus that day in Jericho saw Zacchaeus both as what he was and what he could be. Zacchaeus would begin to fill in the blanks for that love. He would begin to tell others about that story. And by his witness, we now know that the love of God is a willingness to become more like what God intends for us, and to see with the eyes of love and compassion a world that is full of possibility rather than peril. It's full of compassion rather than condemnation. It shows us that we can be great, but only together and without exclusion. It is this hope that we can make the world spin right again. It is this hope and this love that will change the world as it has changed it so many times before. It is this love that will lead us all home. And home is a wonderful place to be. All glory, honor, and power be to the one who was, who is, and who is to come. Amen.